I just got back from seeing Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Sony's latest attempt to keep holding on to that Spider-Man movie license after Venom failed. What a shock. So, my expectations going to see this movie were kind of non-existent, just because at this point I don't trust Sony with the Spider-Man movie license, just because they've proven time and time again that they're willing to shoot themselves in the foot in order to give us what they think is the fan service we want by doing stupid shit like shoving the death of Gwen Stacy and the Rhino in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, or shoving Venom in Spider-Man 3, or making a Venom standalone movie without Spider-Man. It's clear to me that they have no real idea what to do with the license. They just keep making these movies so they can just hold on to the rights. And this is just another one of those attempts. There is a difference with this, though, because this is animated. So it's not like Venom, where they were setting it up to be trying to work somebody into the MCU. They're not doing that. This is clear to anyone that this is a completely removed movie. And when I saw the trailer for it, it didn't look bad at all. I don't trust Sony trailers. I mean, Sony trailers in general aren't very good. Remember those Spider-Man Homecoming trailers that were embarrassingly revealing of all the information? So I wouldn't say I wasn't excited. I just didn't have any expectations. And I don't know if it's just because I didn't have any expectations or I didn't watch any trailers beyond the one, but watching this movie make me wonder, why the fuck did they bother with Venom if they had this? Because this is a fucking breath of fresh air in so many ways. Because it's legitimately a great movie. Like, a really good movie. This is one of the best Spider-Man movies we've had in years. And it's fresh. It feels different. It succeeds in ways that other Spider-Man movies failed. Like, this feels like something new. I'm just going to say up front, I like this better than Spider-Man Homecoming. And that's weird, because Spider-Man Homecoming, one of my issues with it is that it tried to do something different, which I respect, but it did so at the expense of Spider-Man as a character. He was downplayed in that movie, which I don't like. Even if it is younger Spider-Man, I don't think you should downplay a character who is essentially the face of Marvel. But what they do here, because there are multiple Spider-Men, you can do different things with it. You can downplay one but elevate another one, and they utilize it in a very good way. But I'm just going to go into a quick plot synopsis, and then I'm just going to talk about all the likes and dislikes. So basically, this is a universe where it's Spider-Man is just been doing it for years. He's fighting crime, and he's protecting New York City. There's this kid who lives in New York City named Miles Morales. Miles just got transferred to a private school for gifted teens, special teens, smart teens, but he doesn't like it. His parents are kind of forcing him to go there, and he's trying to flunk himself out of class just because it's not his environment. He just wants to be a normal kid. But his parents keep pushing him that way, and the teachers eventually don't let him fail out. They catch on to what he's doing. So he goes to his uncle. His uncle is kind of they allude to him being kind of like not as straight and narrow. Miles' father's a cop, but his uncle's kind of just like he was one of those kids that fell in with the bad crowd and never really got out. It's just kind of a cool older figure that Miles wants to hang out with. So they go, and to cheer Miles up, they go underground and do some graffiti on a wall in a train station. And there, Miles gets bit by a spider. And then when he goes back to school, he's doing the typical Spider-Man things. He's sticking to things, and his spider sense is tingling and all that shit. So he decides to go back to the train station to where his graffiti was to find the spider, and he's looking at it to make sure it's a regular, normal spider. And that's when he runs into Spider-Man himself having an epic battle with a mutated Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, just completely like a monster, and Kingpin is there. And there's this like insane battle going on where Kingpin is trying to trying to open this multiverse because Kingpin is trying to bring his family back. His family, his wife and son, died because they saw him fighting Spider-Man one day and were horrified by what he was doing. So they got in the car and drove away from him, and they were hit by another car and died. So he's trying to open a multiverse so he can get like an alternate version of his family back. And Spider-Man's just trying to stop it because it shouldn't be fucking with the multiverse like that. And Spider-Man saves Miles from Kingpin, or not even Kingpin, the Goblin, and gives him this USB drive after like a big fallout. And he's really, Peter Parker, Spider-Man, is really injured. So he gives Miles Morales this little flash drive that can shut down the machine that's causing all the multiverse distortions. And Kingpin shows up and just flat out murders Spider-Man. Rated PG. Yeah, Spider-Man, Peter Parker dies, and it's up to Miles Morales to stop Kingpin and figure out what's going on with himself. So that's just a spoiler-free premise. I'm probably not going to go too much into any other spoilers. But that already, like, killing of Peter Parker, like, I know because of the comics that Peter Parker is dead in Miles Morales' universe. So, but you see the trailers and you see Peter Parker, so it's confusing. But this is where it's different because the Peter Parker that you see in the trailer is not the Peter Parker that you see in the beginning of the film. The Peter Parker we see in the beginning of the film is a Spider-Man that's been doing it for 10 years. He's just a pure hero. He's got a great relationship with Mary Jane. He's a blonde, weirdly enough, and just a pure hero till the end. The Peter Parker that comes in later is from 15 years in the future. He's a Spider-Man who's kind of fallen off the wagon in a sense. Him and Mary Jane have divorced because he didn't want kids. He's gotten kind of fat and lazy and slob-like, and it's just nowhere near the Spider-Man that he used to be. He wears fucking sweatpants in his spider suit. So that already, but it's weird. He's still, at his core, he's still Peter Parker. He's still got that sense of honor and that selflessness. But there's a small side of selfishness in him because he wants to. It's revealed throughout the movie that he wants to stay in Miles' universe because Mary Jane is there, and now that there's no Peter, and after he had his fallout with his Mary Jane, he wants to stay with this Mary Jane before that fallout happened. But that can't be, and one of the reasons that can't be is because his DNA is unstable in this universe. He's eventually just going to be ripped apart and die. So the whole point of Miles Morales' journey is on top of becoming Spider-Man, on top of trying to fulfill the dead Peter's wishes, and on top of just trying to stop Kingpin, he's also got to save this Spider-Man and send him back to his own universe. So that's an interesting character dynamic right there. And just going back to going to visuals real quick. This movie, when I first saw the trailer, I liked the animation style, but I wasn't too keen on. They seem to be doing this same thing the Lego Movie did, where they drop the frame rate at certain times to make the motion more choppy, and they do it at odd times. It's not constant. I noticed that when the swinging is going on, it's actually a smooth motion. As the movie goes along, you don't notice it as much, but sometimes in the action scenes, it's present, and it makes some of the action scenes really confusing to watch, particularly some of the earlier action scenes. But with that said, the animation style itself is fucking gorgeous. It looks just like a modern comic, but with little homages to old school comics. It's got the little black ink circles that they use for shading. It's got the bleed over blue and red around the black lines. And it's just, you can see like the cross hatching. It just looks like a modern comic, and they have a lot of times where comic panels pop up, and you can see like a comic book onomatopoeia pop up. And it's really, really stylistic, and it never quits. Even when it gets more serious, it never quits. And I like that, because on top of just the consistency of it, it makes this movie stand out in the sense that the tone of this movie is very consistent. Even when it does get more serious, they don't go too serious. And part of me really respects and loves that. And there's part of me that doesn't like it. There's one particular scene that I thought they handled it well, where the Peter from the other universe runs into this universe's Mary Jane, and he's just like, he kind of goes off yelling about all, or talking to her about all the things he wish he could have done, and she's just confused because she doesn't know who the fuck he is, especially because they're at a party where everybody is dressed up as Spider-Man. But they handled that scene in just the right way, because it's made clear, it's like, yeah, okay, these are all the right things you need to be saying, but this is not your Mary Jane. You have your own Mary Jane. I like that. The only time it bothered me was with one scene where they go see Aunt May. And Aunt May sees Peter, this new Peter, and should have been played more emotional than it was. It was played very quick and kind of for a laugh. And it wouldn't bother me so much, but this is taking place like fucking days after this universe's Spider-Man died. So I feel like even if she knows she's not seeing the true Peter, like her universe's Peter, I think she would still have an emotional reaction. I think Aunt May was actually one of the things I can't say I disliked. It was a new take on Aunt May that I just didn't care for, because this Aunt May was kind of like a full of energy badass, which I'll give her credit for being different. I just didn't like it that much, but I can't say it's bad. And this whole movie, it really is fresh in a way that I wasn't expecting, because we've seen 3 different Spider-Man over the course of 15 years, and it is fucking tired. If you really think about it, we've had 3 Spider-Man within the last 10 years, because Spider-Man 3 came out in 2007, Spider-Man Homecoming was in 2017, and then the Amazing Spider-Man trilogy is in between, or the Amazing Spider-Man, 2 of them, was in between that. So 3 different Spider-Men in 10 fucking years. That is ridiculous. And all of them are Peter Parker, and it's the same shit each time. Granted, with elements done better and worse in each version, but it's still essentially the same framework. This is something new. The focus of this is on Miles. He is the main character. Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy in this movie are side pieces. Granted, very nice and important feeling side pieces, but still side pieces. And this is the first time we've had Spider-Gwen in, I think, any movie, really. Any theatrical movie, definitely. And I liked her. She wasn't utilized as much as I wish she was. Like, she's very present in the movie, but they were kind of missing that punky side of her that I really like. But she was kind of like a motherly figure. They were doing that thing that they've been doing in the comics where they're setting her and Miles up. And I don't care for that. Just because, in my mind, Gwen Stacy is always 17 and Miles Morales is 14, so I always find it a little weird. But that's just a personal problem. I'm sure plenty of other people will disagree with that. But the thing with Miles is, and this is an unpopular opinion, because I already said that I like this movie better than Spider-Man Homecoming. I also like Miles Morales better than Tom Holland, honestly, because he's doing all the same things, the same dweeby, sort of awkward, clumsy comedy, but in a way where he still has some confidence, and he's not trying to appease anyone. He's really trying to prove something to himself. Because in Spider-Man Homecoming, so much of it, one of my biggest problems with that was so much of it was him trying to prove he was worth it to Iron Man. And in this, there's a lot of the same, where he's trying to prove that he's worth it to Peter Parker, but he's more so trying to prove to himself that he can do these things. And I really liked that. It was refreshing, and it was a different origin, like a different character, a different narrative. And every time they introduced another Spider-Man, they did this little thing where they showed like the first issue comic and a bunch of flashbacks of their origin story, and it was consistent with each Spider-Man. And they did it with the first Peter Parker, they did it with Spider-Gwen, they did it with the second Peter Parker, and then they do 3 quick ones with the other 3 Spider people that I'll get to. And then Miles has his own at the end. And I gotta say, the opening of this movie is fucking great, because they reference Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3 by having the Miles' universe's Peter reenacting iconic scenes like holding the train or the bow, and they even do the Spider-Man 3 finger gun dance shit, and I fucking loved it. It was so delightfully stupid, but it felt Marvel-ish. But like this, you could definitely tell this was a Sony Spider-Man movie, but it's a Sony Spider-Man movie in all the right ways. I mean, there is still the caveat that there is the obnoxious Sony product placement, because Sony just can't not plug themselves in a movie. I never get this with Sony. Why do you constantly product place your own shit in each one of your movies? Like, fucking Miles Morales is wearing headphones and they have nothing else on. They just say Sony on the side. Like, they literally took the time to animate their own logo onto shit in this movie, and it just felt unnatural. Getting back to the use of comics, in a way, this movie rips off Logan, because they have the Spider-Man comics, in like the actual comics from the 70s in this movie. Like, people wrote comic books about Spider-Man, but it says like based on a true story. And it's just like in Logan when they worked in the X-Men comics, and it's a total fucking ripoff. But honestly, I buy it more with this universe, because it never takes itself super seriously. It's a goofy movie the whole way through, especially when the other Spider-Man come in. Now you got a Spider Noir, Spider Pig. I'm just going with the Simpsons reference, and fucking I don't know what the anime girl was. All I know is that the whole time watching this movie, I was going, kanajo ga aishiteru yo, which means I love her. But actually, she's one of my complaints. Actually, she doesn't talk that much. Like, the anime Spider-Man girl, she doesn't talk that much, and I was disappointed by that. I was a little confused by it. It was her whole character design and the way her powers are presented, because she doesn't seem like she has any actual spider powers of her own. She just seems to be utilizing a robot suit. It felt like a ripoff of Big Hero 6. I'm not sure what the source material is on that, or Spider Pig or Spider Noir for that instance. Spider Noir is fucking hilarious in so many ways. A lot of it has to do with Nicolas Cage as the voice actor, because you could not have picked a better voice actor to deliver some of these lines. There's great little jokes, like, because he's noir and everything's in black and white, he's just perplexed by this Rubik's Cube because it has colors on it, and he's trying to solve it. He's just like, oh, is that purple? Is that purple? Like, he just doesn't get it, and I fucking love it. And Nicolas Cage's delivery is so great. And the pig, I was not expecting the pig to be as funny as he was. I was actually expecting him to be more obnoxious, but he's actually a great, like, he literally is like a Looney Tune in this movie. There's even a point where he drops an anvil on one of the bad guys, and it's fucking hilarious. It is really funny. And there's other running jokes, like the Peter Parker from the future universe. He's lazy, so much of this movie, he's not swinging around to get to places. He actually takes the fucking bus, which is hilarious. And so many times, they're taking the bus, all of them, in their suits. Like, they never get out of their suits, really. They're almost constantly wearing it. And one of my complaints originally watching it, like, I wasn't even done watching it, but I was really disliking how little Miles was actually wearing his own suit. But when he actually does put on his own suit in the climax, it is really fucking awesome. It really is, like, it's like the opposite of what Homecoming did, because in Homecoming's case, at the climax, he wasn't wearing his actual Spider-Man suit. He was wearing those fucking shitty rags. In this movie, he was wearing rags throughout most of the movie, and then he gets the Spider-Man suit, and it comes off as badass, and it's shot, like, the cinematography of it is really great, and the action and the web swing is so fucking fast-paced, and it could be overwhelming at times given the animation style, but at other times you're just like, it's a fucking adrenaline rush, and the music choices they go, I don't like all these songs, but they're utilized in a way to get you just excited. When he was swinging around, I was just so fucking into it. Because it's like, holy shit, it's like a coming-of-age movie almost. He, like, fucking realized his full potential. It was really fucking interesting and really fucking captivating. And Kingpin in this movie, like, he is exaggerated in a huge way. I know Kingpin is big, but like this, he is almost a block with just a head in the middle. It was very comical in the way it was designed, almost a little too farcical at times, but you kind of allow it given that this is a movie with an anime girl and a fucking pig. There's a certain suspension of disbelief at some point. So I didn't mind that. But when he kills Peter, it is so fucking sudden and swift and just kind of brutal. And he every time he does like one of those crazy like murder blows, he does it twice, but each time it catches you off guard because it's so fast. There's never like a big... It's just like silence and then just like a jump cut to him delivering a killing blow. It's really intense. And I get his motivation, but it could have been summed up. It could have been shown better, or they could have showed that connection with his family better. And there's a twist in this movie with one of the villains, and it's an obvious twist, and they don't go the whole way with it, both in a good way and in a bad way. In a good way because the twist is that there's a character who's a good person turns out to be a villain. But the person who's the villain is not just like evil. They're willing to stand down. But there's something that happens with that, and it's not that it's bad. It's just that the connection to make the impact of that scene more, for lack of a better term, impactful, wasn't properly shown. I know I'm being really vague with this, but I don't want to spoil this. And the climax of this movie is very, very fast-paced and visually stunning, but at times it's like the set piece of it, because it's dealing with all these different realms and quantum bullshit, it's confusing in its presentation. Intentionally so, but it can be a little bit of just like, it's kind of like the Lego movie again, going back to like the lower frame rate. It's just like so much shit is happening on screen, just like rubbing your eyes, but oh my god, there's just so much shit to pay attention to. But it's in a good way. It's like, can you hold it against the movie for showing you too much awesome shit? Like, that's a weird complaint. It's like, you are putting too much awesome shit on the screen for me to pay attention to. One of the things I noticed is that there's a nice little homage to Shaun of the Dead. Totally fucking random, but Shaun of the Dead's my favorite movie, so it's nice to see a little homage to it. I think the poster was called From Dusk Till Shaun. That's a cute little, and you could totally, it was Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. I fucking love that. And they should. Kingpin is the main villain here, but they have a side villain who is honestly more, I want to say interesting. I guess not really interesting, but like more fun. They have Doc Ock, but it's not the traditional Doc Ock. It's I think it's his daughter. I'm not entirely familiar with Doc Ock's. If there are other Doc Ocks, I only know the one, Dr. Octavius. But this is a female Doc Ock who is kind of just psychotic. And when she becomes Doc Ock, because you don't know she's Doc Ock, but when she becomes it, you're like, oh shit. And she's just kind of crazy. And she's just a perfect mix of being fucking scary and fucking funny with some of the comedy that they do with her. And in the climax, there's the way they defeat her in the climax is just so perfect. I cannot possibly spoil it because it's such a great way to deliver a laugh and not downplay her too much, but keep the focus on Kingpin, who is the main villain. And again, Kingpin is the one with real motivation, but he's just not the one that grabs me as much as Doc Ock. She was just so entertaining every time she popped up on screen. And give this movie... I mean, this movie is feminist as fuck because every Spider-Man in the world punches this woman in the face. Between Spider-Man, Spider-Boy, Spider-Pig, Spider-Gwen, equal opportunity punches to the face. Hashtag feminism. I guess the only other complaints I have is that sometimes there's a little bit too much comedy. It doesn't become distracting. The only time it bothered me was in that Aunt May scene. But I have a feeling that the film was just trying to emphasize that what's important is not what could have been with old Peter Parker in this universe. What's important is the main focus. And it's almost laser in the sky, but not really. it's bordering it, but because the cast is so entertaining, you can kind of forgive it. If this was something stale, then yeah, I could see why people would hate it. I mean, I like The Amazing Spider-Man, but yeah, that was another laser in the sky, and it was tired in 2012. It would be super tired to have that be like a big threat here, but it's kind of downplayed. It's sort of just an excuse to have all these characters come together. And just two more things that are, not super important, but I feel like talking about. There's Stan Lee. There's two Stan Lee tributes in this. One is just a typical Stan Lee cameo, but it's probably one of the best Stan Lee cameos. Honestly, it's so tastefully done. It's done in a very respectful way, and it just feels like appropriate. And I feel like if this came out before Stan Lee died, like, it still would have been, like, a really nice scene, but it adds a little bit more to it when you see, when you know that Stan Lee is gone now. So it really, really hits you a little bit harder. And then they give you, there's a mid-credit scene. It's not even a scene. It's just a little message dedicated to Stan Lee, and it was tastefully done. It could easily be seen as just Sony trying to pull at your heartstrings, but with the passion I felt in everything in this movie, because this didn't feel like Venom, this didn't feel like The Amazing Spider-Man 2, this didn't feel as Sony meddling and corporate. It definitely felt, the style of comedy and the tone definitely felt different than Marvel. It wasn't the typical Marvel shit. It definitely felt like the things that Sony does right with these characters. And I just want to believe that whole Stanley tribute was in good taste, because it just felt like this movie was made with real passion. And the last thing I'll say is that the post-credit scene of this movie is absolutely worth waiting for, because it does such a good job of tricking you into thinking you're going to be built up to one thing, and then what they deliver is something so perfect that you would expect it on Adult Swim. So much to my surprise, this is a very, very good Spider-Man movie. This is one of the freshest Spider-Man movies we've ever had. I like it better than Homecoming. I don't know how I'd rank it in Spider-Man, greatest Spider-Man of all time, because I do like the Peter Parker stuff. I do love the Peter Parker storyline, but they've never gotten it just perfect in cinema. There's so many things that Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield got right, but got wrong at the same time. And the stories in those movies the style of those movies, I should say, were so tonally different, but there's things I liked a lot about them in each, and things I disliked. But this was just something so fresh. It felt just something to reinvigorate the brand, because it has gotten stale with, again, 3 Spider-Men in 10 years. And this is just, it's just a fun movie. And if I have to give it a rating, honestly, this is a tough one, because objectively, I have very little to complain about. It succeeds exactly at what it set out to do. It's not my favorite, but objectively, it's one of the best Spider-Man movies. So, from an objective scale, I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. Maybe even a 9.5. I don't know. Maybe a 9. It's really hard, just because I would be harsher if the tone of this movie was trying to be more serious, but it's pretty consistent. The only time it bothered me was in that Aunt May scene. But past that, it's just a good, solid movie that I have very few complaints about. So I would recommend everybody go see this. It's the perfect little bit of hype for the holidays. So that's it for this Unmasked. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.